Good evening, everyone. Tonight we honor Stephen Fussell, an exemplary leader whose influence spans over 4 decades in the corporate world with 3 Fortune 100 companies. After earning his Bachelor of Science in Management from LSU in 1979, Steve's career took him from Shell Corporation to Nestle before he found a long-term home at Abbott Laboratories. At Abbott, Steve serves as Chief Human Resources Officer and Executive Vice President of Human Resources, where he led more than 50 mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures, including the creation of 2 large-cap public companies, AbbVie and Hospira. Under his leadership, Abbott grew into one of the world's most respected organizations, being consistently recognized as one of the industry's best deal-makers and named a great place to work in more than 60 countries. Steve's leadership extended beyond the corporate world. As chairman and president of the $450 million Clara Abbott Foundation and a board member of the Abbott Fund, he dedicated himself to making a meaningful impact. Steve's professional and personal contributions afford him accolades such as Human Resources Executive Magazine's HR Honor Roll in 2010 and their Human Resources Executive of the Year in 2014. A proud LSU alumni, Steve's support for the Ourso College is unwavering. He has endowed a scholarship for need-based students from the communities surrounding his hometown of Covington, Louisiana, and he supports the Oaks, the leadership philanthropic arm of the Tiger Athletic Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating Steve on this well-deserved honor. Please join us on stage to say a few words.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. I'll get to the thank yous in a bit, but a little bit about where it started. I grew up in Poltite, Louisiana. Yep, that's it. As the crow flies, that's about 11 miles outside of Covington. On a dirt road, whose name was Fussell Cemetery Road. Which you can clearly see from my front yard. As I thought about things and how it starts tonight, I realized in a sense how fortunate I was. There's an appropriate name for the community, Poltite. Because in that community, the community was tight, but the take-home pay was lean. My dad did carpentry work, painting work, and the work that was necessary to make sure that we had all the things to make it a loving and safe home. We sold cash crops to supplement our income because it was necessary to do. And everything we ate, vegetables and proteins, we grew ourselves. There were always chores to do before school, and we did them happen. So I guess you would say that's part of the reason that I still wake up at 4:30, even though I'm 67 years old today. And that's one thing I'll never get rid of, I suppose. But we were very lucky. I remember one time, actually it was more than one time, fantasizing on what happened, what might, sort of life I might be able to make for myself. I was in that front yard at the end of the dirt road, batting rocks with a stick, while looking across the field where the tombstones of my ancestors lay in plain sight, hoping that I'd have some chance to make a meaningful journey or a meaningful contribution before I joined them there. When I was 5, for reasons that I didn't fully understand, and I'm not sure she did either, other than she saw some purity or wanderlust, as you would, in me. My grandmother mentioned to me that, son, when you grow up, you're not going to live around here. But I also loved living around here. In the fall on Saturdays, I would grow up listening to the dulcet tones of John Ferguson call LSU football alongside my dad and the cheap radio in the room in the house, and later on with my little brother, who's not so little anymore, who joins us this evening. So we might have had other options with my academics, but when it came time to go to school, LSU was the only choice. I showed up. My first job was literally at 10. My parents didn't have enough money, and I certainly hadn't made enough, even though we had worked. So I came to LSU on a federal grant. I also worked full-time while here, and I spent some of that money I earned at 10 at a Purina chicken farm. That's where I worked for the first job. And in those days, everything was manual. The collection of the eggs and the cleanup were all manual. And I often joke years later when I was in the job that I had working for Fortune 100 companies that I'd started my career cleaning up messes, and somehow I still needed the same skills to do it. But anyway, when I showed up in the worst car ever manufactured in the history of humankind, because I was working on some of the weekends and others that had to commute, it was a 1972 lemon yellow Chevrolet Vega. Well, we could debate whether the Pinto was worse, but I can tell you I put a quart of oil at this baby every time I gas at him. Now, here's the reason I needed to go to the business school. I took some of that hard-earned money that we didn't have and paid almost that money to put a quadraphonic music system in the lemon yellow. So clearly I needed to get my rear to the business school. I worked 30 hours a week in slinging hash in the student dormitory. And about 3 weeks in, I wrote this 21-page missive to the head of the food service organization explaining the 7 steps they could take to dramatically improve the efficiency and the operation of the residence food system. I'm sure they were looking for that. So they called me in. And one of those moments when I was reminded of my grandmother's statement to always remember that you had 2 ears, 1 mouth, and use them in proportion. She said, young man, I just want you to understand, first, we appreciate your initiative. And secondly, you need to understand that the reason it's ringing that way is so people like you and those women behind that counter have jobs. And it was a very early lesson. And some of those ideas of like Burrito paper sort of lose their luster when you see them implement and the impact that they have with people. It was a very early lesson, many I received at LSU, about listening. And that if you don't really understand why something was done, why it was made, how it was conceived, how it's manufactured, how it's sold, and how it's serviced, the chance that you will have an opinion that matters and move things forward is pretty low. So with that start, I had a great time to LSU, and I will come back to that in a minute as I close. I will talk about Abbott mostly tonight because I absolutely loved healthcare. During the course of my time there, I can appreciate the trout we're talking about. I was able to, from that small kid batting rocks out of his yards and cemetery, I have almost 5 million air miles, not counting the private ones. 87 countries I have personally worked in, including some that no longer exist. I love it. Put me in the market, whether I speak your language a lot, and let me help you solve your problems, or let me help you meet your opportunities. That was my favorite part of the job. I just love it. It's truly, I miss the colleagues and other things, but that's the part that I miss the most, And I was very fortunate. During the time that I was in this job, we created over 80,000 new jobs. The market cap of the company was $72 billion when I entered this role. And when I left the organization, not only Abbott, but the other 3 companies that we created, the total market cap is over $740 million, an increase 10 times. The rate of return 3 times of the S&P over that period of time. And I was very fortunate to be a piece of that. I was very fortunate to build strong teams everywhere and have a half a dozen of the people who worked for me to go and be CHROs at other companies. Because we were always first about what we needed to do in the business. And in one of those business trips to Tanzania, after we had invented the world's first AIDS drug, I was struck. I was literally unable to move at the impact of unnecessary death and illness in the women and children of Tanzania because of lack of care. I was struck that less than 10% of the orphans of AIDS ever finished even the 6th grade, much less high school. And I was fortunate enough, because of my primary job, to have been asked to chair the foundation and be on the board of the broader Abbott Foundation. We built 18 diagnostic centers across the provinces of Tanzania. We built the country's first emergency medical system in Muhimbili and Dar es Salaam. And we trained over 200 physicians and put them in the countryside so the cure, which if it was available at all, that took days of journey to get to, would be available, and needless suffering and loss of life could be prevented. See, that's why I loved it so much. Every single day, I knew that I would have a chance to do something that improved the length and quality of human life. And that is a rare thing. It gets in your blood pun intended, in this company. So I joked a little bit about the return on the stock in that period of time. I will tell you, after I retired from Abbott and began to diversify to be overly invested in the company that I led, I was fortunate enough, before the weight, pun intended, all your accomplishments came in, to buy a nice chunk of Eli Lilly. That's worked out pretty well. So I want to end simply by letting you know how much this means to me. I want to thank the business school. I'm proud to receive this award, but I'm even more proud to be associated with the tremendous things that the school is doing in the school and in our communities. The preparation it's giving for people like me. I mean, sure, I learned how to tear apart a balance sheet. I learned how to do a deal model. I learned to do all this other things that I mostly went to class to do. But I also learned when I was here to think logically. I also began an idea to understand that, anticipation can actually be taught. With intelligent inquiry and forensic listening, you can get the answers sooner and often more reliably than others. And if you can do that, you'll be such an extraordinary asset to any organization that you work in or any relationship that you're in. And those are things beyond the academics and the other things that I began to form right here when I realized what I might be able to be if I worked harder, longer, and never gave up. And I cannot thank you enough for this award. I can't thank you enough for the experiences that I have here. I look forward to continuing to grow my relationship with the business school and the university. I also want to thank my family, not just for the support of the things that we always say, but for all those times where I was somewhere else and home would have been better, And I especially want to thank my wife, who's not only my best friend, but Christine, as you know, you've always been my muse as well. Everyone, thank you so much for coming tonight. Have an extraordinary evening. Take care.